Tulsi, there's one other issue we wanted to talk about, and it's probably the only issue that we truly disagree on, although maybe we'll find out that we don't, I don't know, which is Ukraine. I understand, given your experiences, why you would be generally very keen for us to avoid war, and I am too. The thing that I wanted to ask you is, why do you think there's a war in Ukraine? In fact, let's just start with that. Why do you think there's a war in Ukraine happening right now?
Well, you look at the triggering event of Putin's invasion into Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Why does she look like Whack 100?
But you also have to look at the history of NATO and incursion and the expansion of NATO.
Automatic talking point, Kremlin talking point, expansion of NATO. So like the common argument from people, like, so let's just tackle this one, right? So usually you can tell someone spreading misinformation, Russian misinformation about the war in Ukraine when they say stuff like NATO expansion. So usually they'll say, oh, way back when, and people sometimes avoid saying this now, but they're saying the same thing. They avoid saying this specifically because it's not true and people have proven it's not true, but they'll say, oh, NATO promised to never expand 1 inch to the east. RFK loves to say this. Here's how we know that's not true. Social media for a second. NATO retains its full prerogatives. While Russia will work closely with NATO, it will not work within NATO. The act makes clear that Russia has no veto over alliance decisions and NATO retains the right to act independently when it so chooses. This is a document signed by both NATO and Russia in 1990. Like, this is from the 1990s, bro. From the 1990s. 1990s, chat. So when people like Tulsi Gabbard sit there and say the expansion of NATO is why this happened, they're lying. We already had an agreement stating NATO had the right to expand whenever it wanted to. Furthermore, NATO was not a military force in the sense that, like, we force people to join us. We're not like we're not conquering. We are a military force. We're not conquering people. We're not forcing them to join. Nations apply to join. They want to be a part of the alliance. Tulsi Gabbard is going to misrepresent this as much as humanly possible, and I want y'all to keep your eyes open and your ears open for these lies from people, because it will happen all the time, and she's going to keep reiterating more lies and more bullshit in this interview.
That played a very real factor in that taking place. In addition to Kamala Harris and others in the Biden administration in the days and weeks leading up to Putin's invasion of Ukraine, basically saying, well, Ukraine needs to be a member of NATO, even though that was not a realistic thing at that given time. And there were many NATO members who were very strongly opposed to that idea. And so,
how dare they? How dare you, as an enemy force that invaded you before 8 years prior, how dare you ever in your life ever try to seek to join a defensive alliance? How dare Kamala Harris? How dare Joe Biden? How dare these people try to give the Ukrainians an opportunity for self-defense? How dare you? How dare you? Listen to what Tulsi Gabbard is saying, bro. That when the Russians were mounting up to invade this nation illegally and subject them to misery for 2 years straight, the villains, the people who really caused it, is not the nation state that did the invasion. By the way, you'll never hear the end of the Iraq War from these people. These people talk about the Iraq War all day long, all the civilians who died, all the American soldiers who died, and then when Russia has their own version of the Iraq War, which is even worse, they excuse it. They say, actually, America's super mean and we're super duper wrong. And if you would only allow them to do what they want, maybe the problem will go away. It's like, are these illegal invasions right or are they wrong? Because I can sit there and join anybody and say the Iraq War is a war crime. The war itself was a crime. George Bush is over there painting in a bunker like he didn't do that. But gee, we remember, it wasn't that long ago. It's 20 years ago. These MAGAites swear to God they hate the Iraq War, and yet when they see a parallel of it, they excuse it. Notice the hypocrisy of people like Tulsi Gabbard and Dave Smith and the rest of them. Notice the hypocrisy. Keep it in mind, and whenever you confront someone who speaks this kind of jibble-jabble nonsense, make sure they actually face, or as Piers Morgan would say, gobbledygook, face it. Actually confront them on this shit. Hold them to it.
Where do you
The
think
war kicked off.
Look, by the way, I don't think anyone sensible would deny that NATO expansion is a provocation to Russia.
Yes.
I think this is undeniable to some extent. I suppose the question is, where do you think NATO should have stopped expanding? Because this is a question.
She doesn't have an answer. She doesn't know. Because she would have to say the 1 inch to the east shit, which everyone knows isn't true. She would have to embarrass herself.
So if you look back to the fall of the Soviet Union,
Yeah.
when I believe it was Russia said like, hey, we would like to join NATO. I think that was a pivotal moment where I think it was Bill Clinton who said no at that time. First he said yes, and then he came back and he said no. But when we look at what was the reason to oppose Russia's joining NATO at that time, there was clearly a decision that had to be made. Well, you know, at that point, fall of the Soviet Union, why should NATO still exist? They needed someone to be the bad guy. And
Yo, like, this perfectly ignores the fact that an actual world war just happened, and Europe is the most... Bro, the last 2 world wars happened in Europe. Why would you create an environment for it to happen again? Why wouldn't you try to get all of these powerful countries that just went to war to form up a defensive alliance that not only defends against one of the aggressors in World War II, which was Russia, that only switched up after Hitler switched up? Why wouldn't you want those nation states to stop fighting? The idea that NATO's existence is only for the sake of fighting Russia is not true. NATO could exist to fight Iran. It could exist to fight China. It's not just to fight off Russia. That's such a small-minded way to think of it. And furthermore, let's talk about Russia trying to join NATO, because I'm pretty sure it's not the way she's representing it. Ex-NATO head says Putin wanted to join alliance early on in his rule. George Robertson recalls Russian president did not want to wait in line with countries that don't matter. Okay. Vladimir Putin wanted Russia to join NATO, but did not want his country to have to go through the usual application process and stand in line with a lot of countries that don't matter, according to a former Secretary General of the Transatlantic Alliance. George Robertson, a former Labor Defense Secretary who led NATO between 1999 and 2003, said Putin made it clear at their first meeting that he wanted Russia to be a part of Western Europe. They wanted to be part of that secure, stable, prosperous West that Russia was out of at the time. The Labor peer recalled in an early meeting with Putin, who became Russian president in 2000, Putin said, "When are you going to invite us to join NATO?" And Robertson said, "Well, we don't invite people to join NATO. They apply to join NATO." And he said, "Well, we're not standing in line with a lot of countries that don't matter." So effectively, and I've already read before, like, there's never been a formal application process done by Russia to join NATO. Tulsi Gabbard is a liar. I just needed to double check to make sure, and I'm glad I did. The account chimes with what Putin told the late David Frost in a BBC interview shortly before he was inaugurated as first president, as Russian president more than 21 years ago. Putin told Frost he would not rule out joining NATO if and when Russia's views are taken into account as those of an equal partner. How are you going to be an equal partner in NATO? It's a collective alliance. This is what I'm talking about. He told Frost it was hard for him to visualize NATO as an enemy. Russia is part of the European culture, and I cannot imagine my own country in isolation from Europe and what we often call the civilized world. I don't know, like what do you, like, Tulsi's just a liar. Tulsi Gabbard is literally just a liar. Like, this idea that somehow or another they tried to actually join NATO, we know it's not true because there's never been a formal application process filed by Russia. Never. Why does she do shit like this? Why is she just a fucking liar? They just needed a bad guy. So historically speaking, we know that's not true because the last 2 world wars happened under, thanks Trouble Latrice for the 5 gifted members, by the way. We know she's lying because Europe was the centerpiece of the last 2 world wars. So we need a secure alliance. We need actual peace in Europe. And we know that Russia was actually a part of the problem in World War II until Operation Barbarossa. So, yeah, like, and even then they had their own imperialistic goals during World War II. What is she talking about? And then to say that Russia tried to join, but we wouldn't let them to make them into a villain, they never tried to properly apply. She's just an idiot. She's just a retard.
So even though there were overtures at that time or direct requests by Russia to be able to join this North Atlantic Treaty Organization and was rejected, every increment of the expansion at that point was a further statement, I suppose, that, well, NATO needs an enemy and Russia is the enemy.
Okay. Here's what I would say. I think that the reason Russia wasn't allowed into NATO is much more the United States' concerns about dominance of NATO. In other words, being in charge. If you have another large country with a huge nuclear arsenal, that upsets the balance. The reason I ask you the question...
We've just established that that's not true. Like, there's never been a formal application into NATO at all. If there was paperwork, I'm sure they would have released it by now. Like, just so we all know, both Kissen and Gabbard are just off their rocker. They're just saying shit just to say it because it's free to say.
The question is this. I'm very familiar with the Mearsheimer argument about NATO expansion, etc. Given what I understand Russia's geopolitical ambitions to be, which is to secure its western flank as much as possible, Russia always expands westwards when it can, because we don't need to get into why exactly, economics and geography, etc. So if NATO wasn't incorporating Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, all these countries that are terrified of Russian westwards expansion, and they have been for historical reasons. They've always been invaded over and over and over. The question to me is, if NATO hadn't expanded or disbanded, which is what some people are advocating, where would Russian tanks be today? Or what part of the world would Russia control? And it seems to me incredibly naive to think that they would have just said, "Oh, okay, we've split up the Soviet Union, we'll just leave it as is." Do you see what I'm saying?
I hear you, but I think that it's an impossible hypothesis to prove one way or the other.
No. And by the way, she doesn't believe this because I'm going to show you a tweet that shows Tulsi Gabbard does believe in historical precedent, just not with Russia. Russia has a history of imperialism in Eastern Europe. They always have. There's a reason why the Poles don't like them. There's a reason why the Ukrainians don't like them. There's a reason why the Baltic region countries don't like them. They have a history of invading their neighbors all the time. This is an established fact. I don't know why we're pretending otherwise. I don't know why Tulsi's pretending otherwise. If you have a geopolitical neighbor who's well known for constantly invading and upsetting the balance of peace in the region, you are not the crazy one for trying to maintain and establish an alliance to protect yourselves from them. If you have someone in the neighborhood who you know is constantly breaking into people's homes, and you and your neighbors form up a neighborhood watch alliance to protect one another, you're not crazy. You have history to back up that this individual walking around your neighborhood is off his rocker. Like, I don't understand, like, why Tulsi's trying to forget historical precedent when she's about to try to use historical precedent in this tweet I'm about to show y'all in a second.
I'm sure that historians on both sides of this point could argue and make credible arguments about what would have or could have happened.
Yeah, no. Anyone who knows the history of this region knows for a fact that there's no debate on what would happen. These nations would be invaded. The end. Like, constantly, Russia issues threats threatening to conquer these nations all the time. I don't know why I don't know why Tulsi's trying to pretend to be stupid, and this is one of the main reasons why it's so important to debate conservatives, because these people build almost all of their arguments on a pile of straw. It's all bullshit.
My point with what is happening today is that, yes, we have to understand history, but we also
You don't
have
know
to
any
look at,
history. How can you speak on it? You don't even know anything. You've been squirming through this entire conversation. I feel like Konstantin Kisin is low-key like babying you here.
at this current war with a very with a realist view
Yes.
of what are
How you gonna have a realist view? You even know what's going on?
Russia's capabilities today. What is the cultural and historical significance of the areas that Russia has tried to take control over or has actually, and what is our continued support of Ukraine in what is essentially a proxy war against Russia? What is the actual objective that they're trying?
You helping those people fight for their freedom and independence, that's not you doing the right thing. That's a proxy war. It's a proxy war. This is the woman who claims to be anti-war. This woman is morally bankrupt. She's compromised. She's a liar. Talking about it's a proxy war. Nice how you completely ignore the innocent nation of people being blown up. You can talk about American weapons, you can talk about Russian invasion, but there is a group of people in between American support and Russian war. They're called the Ukrainian people. And you have conveniently ignored them in order to make a point about a proxy war. That's disgusting.
To accomplish here. We've heard from Secretary of Defense Austin and others in the Biden administration saying, well, they want to weaken Russia or weaken Putin, or they want to punish Putin for what he's done, or they want to essentially enact a regime change and get rid of Putin altogether. But they've not talked about, well, what happens next? What happens when you have a country like Russia that has more nuclear weapons than anywhere in the world? When you remove Putin, and who then goes in to replace him?
All of that stuff is terrible.
Just
I agree.
with what should have happened, and I've said this from the very beginning, is President Biden should have gone in and taken on a leadership role, along with members of NATO and others, to actually be able to negotiate some kind of workable peace treaty to end that war as quickly as possible.
Hold up, wasn't there a deal put in place that both the United States and Russia had to honor, plenty of other European countries, in which Ukraine would give up its nuclear weapons in exchange for national security guarantees from Russia, the United States, and like France or some shit? I wonder who broke that deal. I wonder who broke Minsk. I wonder who keeps breaking all these documents that keep getting signed. Tulsi's a fucking idiot. Like, how do you, when do people like Tulsi Gabbard grow up and realize some nations don't respect written agreements? Like, you can sign as many agreements as you want. You can sign as many as you want. Bro, these niggas don't care about written documents. She doesn't know anything about the history at all. I don't want to call it the Budapest Memorandum because that could be the wrong document. But there was a document signed where Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons. You imagine giving up nuclear weapons, who America could teach you how to use them and properly utilize them. You give them up only to be invaded by one of the countries you gave them up, by the actual country you gave them up to. Tulsi's just retarded. She said that dumb shit before. We should have exhausted every fucking diplomatic option. Are you dumb? You think the professionals who know more about this than you don't know that diplomatic options don't work anymore? You're an idiot. These niggas invade Ukraine the first time because of the Maidan revolution or whatever. Euromaidan or whatever. I hope that's the right term. The Ukrainians revolt. They don't want Yanukovych anymore. They want to be closer to the EU and NATO in the West. Russia invades. Then Ukraine is like, bro, we're not doing this shit anymore. We want NATO. We want security. We want support. We want safety. Russia invades again. What document could you possibly sign? Nigga, ain't no document. You're either going to stand on business and fight, or you just get like, bro, like, oh my God, bro. I just fucking despise Tulsi Gabbard with my spirit. Everything in my spirit, bro. Like, I hate Tulsi. I hate RFK. I hate Trump. Like, I just despise these characters, bro.
And I find it unconscionable that not only did that not happen, but that other countries who have come in and actually brought parties together to the table, that the president has stood in the way of that progress. So as we look at every tranche of billions of dollars that is sent to Ukraine, this most recent one, you'll hear that, well, Ukraine will lose unless we give them this money, but we have no idea how long they can hold the line. No one has been able to define, well, what does a quote unquote win look like? At what point is this just another war of attrition that the United States and others are going to keep funding until what point? What about the Ukraine? I have friends in.
Like, it's crazy how we're the crazy ones. Are you guys going to keep supporting them in their fight to be independent? Or are you just going to, when are you guys going to just finally let them just be conquered? Why won't you let them be taken over and destroyed, Joe Biden? Like, that's basically how she sounds. Is like, are you going to continue to help these people defend themselves? You're going to let them die already. This is the same lady who complains about Iraq all the time. Her and Dave Smith. Both of them swear to God they hate the Iraq war, and then when they have an opportunity to protect the equivalent of the innocent Iraqis who were their lives ruined by George Bush, by the American government, when you have an opportunity to be on the right side of history, you pick the aggressors. What the fuck are we talking about right now?
Ukraine. I've been there many times, and
Me too.
And it is the Ukrainian people who are paying the price for this, and generally.
They want to fight. They want to fight. Notice how she says it's a proxy war. The Ukrainian people are the ones paying the price. She tries to make it seem like they don't want to fight for their survival. They do. That's the problem, is they do want to fight. It's been 2 years, G. You're the delusional one. They want to fight. You know that, which is why you have to this is what people who are like Russian apologists will do, is they'll try to invalidate the actual humanity and autonomy and agency of the Ukrainian people and make it seem like this is just Joe Biden and Putin moving chess pieces. Bro, Zelensky exists. The Ukrainians exist. These niggas do stuff we don't even know about. That incursion into Kursk, we didn't know about. I heard that we didn't even know about it.
Sometimes war is necessary. It is always unfortunate. It is always ugly. Unfortunately, sometimes it is necessary. I'm not a pacifist or an isolationist who...
That's what you are. You refuse to see a necessary war when it's looking you in the face. The Iraq war was not a necessary war. That was a crime. And you know it was a crime. But then, when you see another war crime happening in front of you, in which the Ukrainian people have a chance to actually fight back, no Al-Qaeda, no radical insane groups. It's just the Ukrainian people fighting for their right to exist. You don't support it. You don't have the ability to know when an actual war that needs support is in front of you. You don't know what it looks like. You don't know. You're not capable of... You don't even know the history. If you did, you probably would agree with Joe Biden. I'm tired of people that don't know shit pretending like they know something. You don't know anything.
Thinks that, doesn't live in a real world. But I truly believe that all diplomatic efforts need to be exhausted before we go and pursue the path of war. And if we pursue the path of war, there has to be very clearly defined objectives and a definition of what we are trying to accomplish. What is a win that is based on reality, not based on some...
Imagine you give a nigga your nuclear weapons and he still invades you. What more is there to talk about?
Fantasy that will never actually be possible.
Yeah, I agree with almost everything you're saying, actually.
Lord have mercy, bro. These are crazy. Now I'm getting a Matt Walsh advertisement. All right, let's look at this Tulsi Gabbard tweet. This bit crazy. Tulsi said, as we remember Japan's aggression in the Pacific, remember when I told you guys about historical precedent? Remember when I told y'all about how Tulsi Gabbard was pretending like there was no historical precedent that would give NATO a reason to exist? Now she knows what historical precedents are. As we remember Japan's aggression in the Pacific, we need to ask ourselves this question. Is the remilitarization of Japan, which is presently underway, truly a good idea? We need to be careful that short-sighted, self-serving leaders do not end up bringing us again face-to-face with a remilitarized Japan. Hashtag Pearl Harbor, which is unbelievably disrespectful. To after years of Japanese people cooperating with us, working with us, allowing us to station our Marines and our Navy in their country, after all of that, reconciliation, rebuilding, you just middle finger these people and bring up Pearl Harbor. You're incapable of acknowledging Russia's history of expansionism and imperialism. And after all the years of the Japanese working with us since World War II, this is your thank you. This is a piece of shit. Actual piece of shit. Literal fucking demon. This chick is a fucking piece of shit, bro. As we remember Japan's aggression in the Pacific. Bitch, did you forget the invasion of Poland? Conveniently? Did you forget the war in Chechnya? This chick is an absolute idiot, bro. Absolute idiot. Sitting there talking about some remember Pearl Harbor. When we remember Pearl Harbor in America, we don't do it by saying, by the way, Japanese, you remember that time that you guys were crazy? It's usually just, hey, let's remember our dead who fell in war. This tweet is actually disrespectful. Self-serving leaders do not end up bringing us face to face with a remilitarized Japan. What are you trying to say about the Japanese people? Are you saying that we can't trust them with weapons because they might go crazy again? Like, that's basically what she's saying. Is, we don't know if you'll go insane again, so you shouldn't be able to defend yourselves. And we know that we need Japan in order to defend Taiwan. Tulsi's trying to undermine America's ability to fight, like a proper two-theater war. This is disgusting. Tulsi's a fucking retard, bro. I can't read more retardation and expect my brain to continue to work. All right.